Welcome to Recovery Authors. This is your host, Jesse, and I have a tremendous recovery author who's an actual author today, Mr. Max Nijst. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Cool. Let's hear about how you got to be a recovery author, Max.
All right. Well, I've been clean and sober since September 27th of 2003. And like most of us, all of us, we all have our war stories. But what, catapulted me into writing a book is starting about 4 years ago, I would lose 3 family members, like pretty much back to back. I would lose my sister 3 days after I turned 13 years sober. 8 months later, my brother would lose his battle to addiction and he would take his own life. And then 6 months to the day on Thanksgiving Day, my mother would pass away, literally of a broken heart. Wow. And then that following Monday, I would put my youngest daughter into treatment. So wow. What started this process about 7 years ago, I said, I want to write a book. I just want to write a book about, people in recovery, my story. And, but as you know, sometimes us alcoholics or addicts can be the greatest procrastinators I've ever met. Okay, I'll do it. I would start it. I would stop. I would start. And, but when that happened 4 years ago, it was like, I needed to do something to kind of heal from those losses,
Right.
And, the 2 gentlemen that really helped me get this going and start it and said, you need to write your book. And I remember it was right after my brother had committed suicide. I was on my way to Minnesota. And things were just, things were going south. And I remember when I came home and just saw that look of my mom's face, when, and I got to be honest with everybody, I had to not tell the truth because it probably would have put her in her grave quicker. She thought it was an overdose, so, but on the way back, I was thinking to myself, like, how am I going to heal from this? I didn't think about drinking or using. There was no thought of putting a needle in my arm again, maybe some thoughts of homicide, you know what I mean? Or
sure,
just craziness. But I said it was time. So I reached out to the 2 gentlemen that have helped me start this process that I had kept putting on the shelf for a while. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do it. And so my friend, Chris Whitehead, who's not in recovery, but helped me start my outline. He said, yeah, no better time than the present. Right. So I began that process last year, and I worked with a guy named Brian K. Wright, he has that Success Profiles radio podcast, and he's been helping people write books for quite a while. So I reached out to him and we got the book out. And Terrific. In that process of writing that book, I actually got to go, because he lives in Arizona. So he said, hey, I don't normally do this, but why don't you come out, and we'll sit side by side and we'll get this book out.
Wow.
And I got to go out there for a weekend, and then a Saturday, I think it was a Saturday and Sunday, for 8 hours a day, we just sat and finished the book and we got it out.
Hold on. Are you suggesting that you wrote an entire book over one weekend?
No. I don't suggest. It was to finish up what we had started. No, it had been over a whole process, but to get that last part, to get it out, to get it published, I sat with him for a weekend, and my wife went with me, and she would take off to go shopping, and we sat for 8 hours a day, and we finished it, and we got it done. And it was very, as they say, cathartic to write that book, to go over stuff. And it's not about my war stories. There's stuff in there that led me and what got me into my addiction even worse, as they would say. Mm-hmm. But it's about how I've applied the principles that I use in the program I go to, which is AA, right? In the 12 steps that helped me get through that, and the magic that happened, like I said, not one thought of drinking or using, and as recently as last year, where we lost our granddaughter right before Thanksgiving. And then my son I was telling you about, who had a stroke at 30 years old, at 30 days sober, bad choices, bad genetics, drug use.
Sure.
had a massive stroke that almost killed him. You know, he was on life support for 10 days, had 2 more strokes while he was on life support.
Wow.
But, you know, now he's in my living room, you know, he's talking, watching
Right
TV,
now, living and breathing
he's
as we speak.
alive and he's learning how to talk. Sometimes I think that's a good thing where he doesn't talk so much. So it's kind of cool.
Max,
But,
you really are. It's a commendable thing that you have done. What I think everybody on planet Earth really probably believes. You know, the saying is everybody's got a book inside of them, and you certainly have had your share and probably 6 or 7 other people's shares worth of tragedy in your life. And this is all in sobriety that we're referencing here. And what I'd like to do right now is take you back to way before you were able to write a book, way before you were capable of taking care of all these people and enduring unspeakable tragedy in your sober life. Let's hear, how did you, how was your life growing up? And briefly, let's touch on kind of the forces that drove you into addiction.
okay, so I grew up with a single mother. You know, I come from a family of 7. There's 5 of us that are left. All the males, all the brothers have, you know, addiction. You know, I have my oldest brother who's 36 years clean and sober. There's myself with almost 17 now. And then I have a brother who's in the middle between us, who's an active alcoholic, right? And then my little brother, which I just spoke about. But all the girls, you know, it seemed to the gene skipped them, as they say. And,
Nice.
but, you know, I didn't grow up in an abusive home. I grew up in middle class Orange County in California. You know, went to a nice high school, played sports.
Okay.
Nothing, you know what I mean? But like you hear most addicts and alcoholics, I always felt apart from. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, right?
Sure.
So, you know, I like to say when I speak sometimes that I went to a party at 13 and I didn't get home till I was 32. And,
I love it.
You know, it started at 13 in junior high with, you know, marijuana, smoking pot and drinking here and there. And like I said, my mom she was a wonderful lady, wonderful lady. I mean, she did everything that she needed to do to put a roof over our head, you know, put food on the table, nice, you know, clothes, and always made sure our needs were taken care of. But like she worked a lot. So there was not a lot of, you know, I didn't get a lot of affection or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if that has anything to do, but mom was always busy. But we had such a huge family that there was a lot of love in the family, you know, whether we were with cousins, aunts, uncles, you know, our family's huge. And so I can't say that I came from some crazy background where, you know, mom and dad were drinking and using, I was using with them, you know, they abused me. That wasn't the case. But what I did find out is that alcoholism and addiction ran deep on both sides of my family. Okay. Right. So on my mother's side, my grandfather, her father, was an alcoholic and an addict, but he wasn't an addict by choice. He was shot during World War II by the Japanese, and back then it was just pull the bullet out. Here's morphine. Be on your way. You know what I mean? But
sounds rough.
Yeah, it was rough. So, but I found out he was an alcoholic, and then when I turned a year sober, I found out from my mom when she came to watch me take my 1-year chip. She's like, you know, your dad was an alcoholic. I go, great,
that was
Mom.
the first time you found out.
Yeah, first time I found out, right? And then she's like, oh, yeah, he was bad. And I go, well, don't you think you should have told me this growing up? She goes, you would have been just like your dad and did what you wanted anyway. So I just figured I wouldn't rob you of your journey per se. You know what I mean?
Huh.
But
so
you know,
how was it as a teenager? Like, did you got into having looked through your book, you've gone through some pretty harrowing times in your addiction. Tell me, give me a story about that time in your life so we can kind of show the listener like where you've come from, and then later we'll talk about what you're doing today, which I find absolutely incredible. So let's go back to like that dark place. Like where were you at?
Okay, so where the dark place really took off. So I didn't heed the signs going through junior high school. You know, I joined the Navy. What happened, it came more, you know, I knew there was a problem, but I never addressed it because I could stop back then, you know what I mean, with the drinking. Like when we found out my son was coming, I quit smoking. That day I threw a brand new pack of Marlboros out and quit everything. So, I told myself, I don't have a problem. But what happened, fast forward, was when the drinking got worse and I went through my divorce and my wife ended up taking the children out of state without telling me. I was drinking heavily. I wasn't so much doing the drugs yet, just here and there, with friends, whatever, partying. But that was it. When she took, the only thing that was kind of holding me together were my children on the weekends, because I would get them every weekend. My brother had just got out of prison at that time, after his first what do you call it, in prison, his first. And I was actually cleaning out my mom's garage to build a room in there because it was so big. I didn't want to tell my friends I was living with mom, but if I made a room in the garage, I could tell them I had my own place. My life was falling apart.
Yeah.
I
How
found.
how old are you at this point?
I think I'm about, I want to say 27, 28 years old.
So you'd gone into the Navy, or I think you said?
I just discharged at the age of 21.
Okay. 21.
My son was born. I was still in the service when my son was born. So that was in 1988. And then, he was born in 1989. And then shortly after there, he was born in March. I was discharged in May of 89. So I was about 21. Her and my ex and I were married for 8 years. So that's when the ups and downs of not really knowing I was getting myself into that addictive, state, because I worked for Xerox. I worked for at that time, a Fortune 500 company. I was a suit and tie guy,
right?
The white picket fence, everything was cool. But what happened was at close to 7-8 years, when the marriage started falling apart, I ended up getting fired from that job, right, because of my drinking. And so I went from the white picket fence to the streets in just about a year's time.
Wow. So being in the mom's garage was kind of on your way down then, wasn't it?
That was actually, I thought it was cool because I built it myself and it looked really cool, but it was the signs. And then when I got that call that she had moved to Nebraska and taken the kids and the whole thing about not coming back, and I found that spoon and that needle, I knew exactly what my brother was doing. So that night, or the next night, I actually went and bought a 1/4 ounce of methamphetamine, invited my brother over, because there was one door. It was one way in, one way out. Right. So I threw the spoon, the needle, I had it all set up, on the table. And I told him, I go, look, this is what happened. Basically what I told him, like, I don't want to feel this. So you're going to teach me how to do that.
Now, hold on. Prior to that, what kind of drugs had you done? What kind of drinking had you done prior to that day?
Oh, prior to that day, it was mostly just drinking. But in high school, like, if you want me to go back, in high school, cocaine came into the picture my junior year.
Okay.
So
up until that point, there had been no needles. Like, this was the day.
No, none. I wouldn't even, I was that person that would look at people like,
right. I don't do that, but pass the other stuff.
Oh man, like, how dare you? You're like, that's not cool,
Sure.
And then up to that point, it was mostly marijuana, pot, cocaine here and there. And I had experimented with meth, but nothing major at that point, you know what I mean? Until then, when I knew what my brother was doing, and I knew that alcohol was no longer working, you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't get drunk enough to not feel that pain of the divorce and of my ex-wife taking my kids out of state. When I saw that, it was like, okay, I know what he's doing. So I closed the door behind us and I sat between me and the door, and I told him, I said, you're going to teach me how to do this? And he's like, no, I'm not. Yeah, you are. No, I'm not. We went around for like 2 hours, and I finally just looked at him and I said, look, bro, I said, there's one way out of here, or two ways out of here. You either show me how to do that, or you beat me up and you can walk out this door. And I don't think the second's going to happen.
Wow.
And so he did. And I remember that night, it was like I found heaven. You know what I mean? It was the craziest feeling. It was like my head told me that, like, I will never have to feel this pain ever again as long as I keep doing this. You know what I mean? So that was it. That was the downward spiral that would take me to the streets, get me kicked out of my mom's house, start going to jail. You know, it was just like, it got so bad that one point at that house that my mom lived at, I remember I just come off a run and I was sleeping, and someone's shaking me. I'm like, Mom, I'm trying to sleep. And she had gotten so mad at me. Like, she had told me, I'll get you back, you know, because I would take her car and not come back for a couple
Ooh.
days, pull that kind of stuff on her. Um, and then I heard the radios.
Oh, I knew it.
I'm like, oh my God. And I rolled over and there's 4 Cypress PD looking down at me. He's like, hey, yeah, you know where you're going today, you know what I mean? And I looked up and I said, I know it's not Disneyland, you know? And there was my mom in the doorway just shaking her like finger at me, like, I told you. But that was
wow. So she called the cops on you. What did she charge you with?
I'm sorry, what's that?
What did she charge you? What did you get charged with in that
I
situation?
think it was because I had a warrant for not, failure to appear. And I was
so
on
she didn't
probation.
charge you with grand theft auto or anything like that?
No, thank God. She could have many times, you know what I mean? Like, I would literally go, Mom, can I borrow your car for 5 minutes? And you go to the store, and I would show up 3 days later. Oh yeah, we, you know, between my brother and I, we put that poor lady through absolute hell, you know what I mean, with despairing, being high, and just, you know. But one of the gifts I got to give her, and it was cool because it was, how do you say it? It was, here's how that came through. So we were sitting 2 weeks before she passed. We were in her assisted living. I was sitting on the couch with her, and she reached over, you know, patted my knee, and she said, you know, she had forgot I just turned 14 because she had dementia, but she looked at me and she said, thank you for your 13 years of sobriety. God answered my prayers. And we both just started to cry, and I started to cry, you know what I mean? But I wanted to say, Mom, I just turned 14. Come on, remember? But I didn't, you know what I mean? I did it. But that's a gift that you cannot put a price on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those were the events. That's where it started to get bad. Then I'm running the streets, you know what I mean? I'm getting involved with gang members of all sorts, you know, running the streets where the seedy motels are at, and going to jail here 1 or 2 days. And then it started getting more and more and more. And thank God I didn't go to prison, but that was the last. After my last absconding from probation, that was my choice, was either to find a place to go to treatment or go to prison for 3 years, because I hadn't done anything the judge had asked, and that's a whole other story. I got to thank that judge actually at 3 years sober.
Yeah. So what's the so in this story, it sounds like, you know, you had a lot of scrapes with the law. Like, you know, you didn't get long-term prison time, thank God. And the moment that you finally got clarity and decided to make a difference, did you have like a bright shining light come in? Was it a profound experience, or did your experience more resemble kind of that slow refocus?
Well, there was a couple where I can say they were not the bright light, you know what I mean? But they were very profound. So the first instance, when I was in jail doing my last violation, which was a 6-month violation, about 2 weeks in, my mom finally comes to visit, right? And I remember I'm sitting across the glass from her, and before I could speak, she said, you know, pretty much in her thick Dutch accent, just listen. And she looked me in the eye and she said, I love you, son, but you're no longer welcome at my home. If you come near my home, I will call the police. And if my neighbors see you, they're to call the police. What are you going to do? And for the first time in the 9 years of my very heavy addiction, I came up with the best answer. And I told her, I don't know, Mom. And she started crying. And I'm like, what are you crying for? I start crying. And she goes, that's the best answer you've ever given me. Because, you know, as fellow addicts and alcoholics, we've made so many empty promises. I don't know how many times she would come to visit and I'd say, I promise I'll get a job. I promise I'll find the kids so you can be a grandma. I'll do better, I promise. And then have I'd have a connect pick me up when I got ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's as if the words promise mean I absolutely will not effing do this.
Right, exactly.
Right?
So that was one of those moments where I knew that, you know, this is where my life had come to. I'm looking at possibly 3 years in prison. I got to make changes, right? And then so
Yeah.
when I went into jail that time, this was after I did 5 days in LA County, and then they came and picked me up and brought me back to Orange County. And it was, and I share this, is where I walk into the cell with the deputy finally after going through booking, right? And I hear
Yeah.
my name getting called off, and, you know, hey dog, what's up, homie? And I'm like, really, dude? Like, this is what my life has come to.
Yeah,
And, you know
all
what I
my
mean?
friends are already here.
Yeah, they were all, and it, you know, and in a way, I thank God, because it made that time easier. You know, being in jail sucks, but when you got people that, you know, and we're all doing the best to make the best of our time, you know, joking, laughing, but whatever. I actually have to say that they helped make the time go a little bit better, even though, 6 months, because I was there almost, I didn't get the good time because the judge was like, I'm over you. You know, you're not going to my streets.
Right.
I'm not releasing you until I either find you a place or you're on that bus to go to prison. So, so another night, what happened was I was having this conversation with my bunkie, and I was in that full blown self-pity, poor me, you know, whatever. I was just, and I remember I was telling him, like, oh, like, dude, I love my kids so much. Well, I was just going on this rant.
Yeah.
And it got silent for a second, you know, and I'm not going to hold back, but this is what he said. He said, hey, homie, he goes, if you love your kids so much, what the fuck are you doing here?
Yep.
And I remember jumping down, like, how dare you disrespect me? You know what I mean? And I remember staring at him like, we're about to go at it, you know, because I can't back down now. And
nope.
And I remember just looking at him, you know, and we got to know each other. And I said, you're right, bro. I go, you're absolutely correct. And he got up, you know, and he gave me a hug. He said, get out of here, you know, when it's time, and do something different.
No kidding.
But we had all these big dreams. You know how when you're sitting, I know when I'm going to do this different. It's either you're going to know how to sell dope better and get high better, or you're going, I'm going to change, you know, I'm going to become a better man. But that was one of those moments. And for me, my spiritual experiences have been just like the big book talks about, and I'm not, you know, trying to push anything here, but
you're good.
Mine were of the educational variety. Like, over time, I've seen things happen where I just go, I can't explain it.
Right.
Like through those deaths of my family, you know, and recently, the magic for me that happened in working those 12 steps is not once did I think about drinking or using. And
that's amazing. That's terrific. So, obviously the gradual experience of you know, using the 12 steps, obviously a big figures prominently in your story. What I think is one of the most beautiful things in terms of your story is how you've been able to not only recover from heavy addiction and chronic jailing and that sort of thing, is the fact that you've been able to take what you've been through and turn it into a mission and a purpose for your life. So one of the key things for me on this factor is that so many people in 12-step programs have this, in some cases, it's a misunderstanding of anonymity. And in other cases, it's an overzealousness towards anonymity. But I think for some people, it's really important to shed that anonymity, as obviously it is in your case, in my case, because with the technology being the way it is today, I really feel like if I don't stand up and say something, then who's going to? Could you talk about coming out and deciding to write a book about all this stuff and just, you know, the fear involved in that?
Right. So in the process, you know, I have family. I didn't want to, which and in the end, it was my own fear, you know, but I didn't put like anybody out there. Like, I didn't have a story, like I said, you know, where I'm going to be putting somebody on Front Street because they did this to me or that to me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I took full responsibility for my addiction and all my actions that I did while I was under the influence. And but there was that fear, like I would get, there's that fear of judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and then even in the program, hey, we're supposed to be anonymous. But here was another catalyst for me that drove me to write the book, right? Because as you know, this fentanyl, this heroin epidemic that's killing these kids. I've been a counselor for almost 12 years now, right? And if I'm not sharing with them, in a general way, I don't get specific on like my issues, but like how I
Mm-hmm.
recovered, how am I going to help them? And I understand the anonymity, because there is situations where you just got to go, I'm not going to tell this person because the judgment's going to come and whatever, they're going to prejudge me. And my purpose here is to be truthful and then let them judge for themselves what to do. You know what I mean? But my
Fantastic.
thing is these kids are dying, I'm sure you've seen it on Facebook where like in one county, 10 died of an overdose in one day. You know what I mean? And so I started, as long as I'm not breaking anybody's anonymity, I don't care if I break mine, because I felt I need to show people that you can and you do recover if you do some work. Whether it's a 12-step program, whether it's smart recovery, whether it's celebrate recovery, you got to do the work,
Yep.
because what I was taught early on by my mentors is like, and my sponsor, you can't sit next to somebody with 30 years, rub elbows and go, okay, I'm going to get sober. That doesn't work, right? We got a ton of work to do on ourselves and get right with, for me, it was get right with God and myself and others. And
Sure.
so I chose to, after writing this book and seeing a lot of the friends that you've seen that I have on Facebook that are out there doing the same thing, we're trying to save these kids' lives. We're trying to save people's lives. And I see it, like, to be honest with you, in the 12 years as a counselor and the 16 years of being clean and sober, the count has gone up every year. Like, I don't even have enough fingers and toes of people who thought, well, you know what, I'm sober now, I can go back out there and do it differently.
Right. Yeah. So that brings me 2 points, which I like to touch on. One is that, as I understand it, Max, and I'm certain you do too, addiction is a lifelong illness. And I always like to make the point, if addicts had a purple thumb, then it'd be real easy to remember for the rest of my life, because I can always reference that purple thumb,
Absolutely.
and just know, but I look like everyone else. So, in the past, when I was going through my relapses, I would say, hey man, maybe I can pull this off. Maybe I can have a little bit to drink, or maybe I can smoke a little marijuana and be all right, and not, find myself completely in an unmanageable lifestyle within a few short days or weeks.
Right.
Now, a real important point right now for me, Max, is something that I think you could shed some light on, and that is the fact of parents. Now, you've touched on your mom a lot, but as a therapist and a counselor, you probably deal with a lot of parents who have a scenario, for example, where they might come to you and say, hey, my son has started smoking marijuana and he thinks it's okay. And society is starting to tell him that it's okay. And now he wants to do it every day. Maybe he's trying to get a marijuana medical card or whatever the case may be. Now, what do you tell a mother in that scenario?
And I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate for me. I haven't run into a mother like that, or a
Uh-huh.
father.
Sure.
Most of mine have come in that are doing detox from heroin or pills or alcohol. And I've had those heart to heart where, like, if you don't stop doing what you're doing, you're going to kill your child, like that whole codependency enabling thing. But,
Hold
you
on,
know,
let's talk about that for a second, because those might be new terms to some of these people listening to the podcast. Okay, so we'll dial that example back a little bit. But for example, my mom was codependent. My mom was an enabler. She's passed now, but that's a huge thing. I think most addicts have one or two or three people like that in their lives where they're codependent and enabling. What does that look like for somebody who's not familiar with those terms?
so the best way I can explain it, say it's the wife. Okay, for example, the wife, because the husband drank too much the night before and is too sick because he's got the shakes.
Mhm.
the one who calls the work and says, oh, my husband's sick, he's got the
Sure.
flu,
Mhm.
he's not feeling well, so he won't be in today. The one who covers, or you can go the extreme other way where it's the one who thinks because they're the sober one, they can fix that person. If they just listen to me, I'll fix them. And those are
Yeah.
the two extremes. And there's a gentleman who has passed, John Bradshaw, that talks about family systems, the scapegoat,
Mm.
the hero, the black sheep of the family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know them all by heart, but I did a group on that in family group the other day where I talked about, and it was funny because some of the family members were just not like, when I would talk about each one, they were like, that's me. Oh,
Yeah.
that's me. You know what I mean? And then one husband actually goes, I'm the enabler. I got to change that. You know what I mean?
I'm really glad you mentioned that name, John Bradshaw, folks. If you're listening right now and you want to get somebody who's got a terrific perspective, in my humble opinion, on these situations, John Bradshaw, I think you can find a lot of his stuff on YouTube.
You can. I mean, he traveled all over the world teaching this stuff, this family systems thing. And before he passed, and I thought it was brilliant because it put something on each individual in the family where they were at, and it changes, but you know what I mean. My mom was an enabler at first, she would,
Yeah.
but then it was like she went to
She
Al-Anon.
she figured it out though, didn't
She
she?
figured it out on her own, and I always called her my black belt Al-Anon, even though she never went, because that was it. She was done. She was done.
Well, that's actually two resources which I'd like to mention, maybe even three. But the first thing I want to say is absolutely with regards to codependency and feeling as if you can fix your family member. Al-Anon is a wonderful resource for those people that might be thinking that, because that's for the family members who are not alcoholic or addicts, but they, thank God, still have love and want to help that individual, but they probably have a sense that they're doing it wrong, right? Because things are just continuing to progress and get worse. And to that point, I would say that in my experience, addiction is a family disease.
Absolutely.
Right.
I teach that. It is.
It's so common to see people blaming the addict or the alcoholic. And the dynamic, I mean, if you really want to have a healthy family, it seems to me that there's really no individual. It's all a team effort. And if one person is incredibly sick and taking drugs and alcohol just to cope with daily normal life, then, it's worth stepping back and saying, how am I impacting this? And how could I change to perhaps help heal this?
Right. Exactly. And I've worked in enough places where I've seen that, where the parents will drop off their child and go, okay, they'll be here for 90 days, fix them, we'll be back and pick them up when you're done. And I'll have to go, no, it doesn't work that way, because one thing I try to incorporate in my counseling is family, and doing family sessions, getting them on the phone if they're out of state, and, talking and facilitating, healthier communication, and, getting, not to point fingers, but to show where as a family, like you said, it's a family disease, and it's a disease that has no cure, right? But we can arrest it, and we can, I try to show parents, with their help, the success rate increases if they get involved. And not only, because I tell the families, I go, you're in recovery too. You don't know it, but you're in recovery too. You've been affected by the addict or the alcoholic. You need to go get help, and you need to learn how to take care of yourself, but yet not enable the alcoholic or the addict, and have some healthy boundaries. And like, I had one dad when I worked at a facility, their family program was 4 days long,
Okay.
So on Tuesday, I would kind of share my story as, on how it affected my family, and what my mom did and stuff like that. So this guy comes up to me after that one, and big dude, and he's looking down at me. I'm just going to say, why can't Johnny just say, no, I quit?
Right.
So I said to him, I said, you know, you're a pretty big guy, sir. And I said, you know, here's what I want
Sir.
you to do. Yeah. I go, here's what I want you to do. I said, I want you to go to the nearest train track, you know, and I want you to stand on the track, let a train come at you at, say, 5 miles an hour. Put your hand out and try to stop that train. And he goes, well, that's a big train. I go, exactly. I go, so here's what addiction is like. I go, you know, and I told him, I go, you know what the bullet train is in Japan, correct? He's all, yeah. I go, well, that's addiction when it's in full flight. It's full speed. You can't stop it. And no matter how much you tell Junior to stop or you know, cut back, it's not going to happen. And he walked away. He goes, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I said, so this is where you get to take care of your recovery and him, and then you come together as a family, and then you start the healing. So
that's a terrific metaphor. I never heard that one before, but I'm definitely going to steal it from you, Max. You know, that's, I mean, I guess getting back to the original hypothetical question, you know, in terms of helping somebody you see going down that path, and you know, it's really more about what can you do to not prevent it, but I mean, how do you talk, Max, to somebody who's 19 or 20 and maybe they haven't even gotten into hard drugs yet, but they're dabbling, or they're starting to drink too much and it's starting to show up? Like, it's really hard to get through to that 19-year-old me, if not impossible. Like, what can a parent do?
Yeah, that's it, you know. But like for me, see, this is what I've learned in being active in my recovery, and finding the people that walk the walk and talk the talk, and what they did with me when I relapsed 4 times when I finally went to in the facility, you know. My sponsor would say, you know, they give you all those things, call me before you take the drink, or call me before you take the drug, because then I can help you, right?
Sure.
But once you do, I can't stop you, right? And I learned that the hard way. So, you know, I try to have those open and honest conversations, but like you said, it's that mentality. It's their mentality that they're untouchable, they're indestructible. How do you do that? It's hard.
What about somebody who doesn't really think they have a problem?
That's
you know,
even harder.
Yeah, if you're talking, yeah, but like, do you talk to teens in your practice?
I do. I used to work at a place that was a drug addiction facility for teenagers from 13 to
Okay.
18, or no, actually 12 to 18.
Super. Yeah.
And you know, I have 3 gentlemen that I got the pleasure of counseling that are still sober 5 years later. One actually went to UC Berkeley and got his degree. That was my toughest challenge, because you're talking to kids that have not experienced what we've experienced. You know what I mean? They haven't been home.
Well, they haven't seen the latter part, right? But they're in the early part. And it's funny because we've been there, right?
Right.
You and I were there. So
Yeah.
it should be a little easier than, say, Joe Blow off the street who didn't get addicted to drugs.
Right. But it's hard when someone doesn't have the experience that we have, and we see it coming, and you know what I'm talking about. You're like, I see it, the crash and burn is coming, and no matter what you say, if you come from a loving place of love and compassion, or that hard line, like, you're gonna, you know. And like I said, I had 3 of my own that are chip off the old block, and like my son is the biggest example. You know, like over a year ago, he got diagnosed with congestive heart failure, right? And it was because of his poor eating habits, poor genes, and his drug use. And I would tell him, you know, you figure he would listen to his dad, who's been sober for a while, but no, you know. And it took at 30 days sober for him to have a massive stroke to show all the people who think I don't know what I'm talking about, go,
Right.
oh God, you know what I mean? He's right. And it's not about being right. It's just, you know, I've taught, I can't rob anybody of their experience. As painful as it was to watch my son go through that, and my youngest daughter, you know, and my middle daughter, who I think is one of us, but just is in denial, but she handles her business. So I can't really say anything, you know. She works, she does her thing. But when you're that close, they don't want to hear you. It's like the Peanuts cartoon, right? All they hear is wah, 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 wah.
You know what? You touched on something interesting there, though. So, in the one end of the spectrum with a parent, you've got the enabling parent. And maybe in our hypothetical, this parent is saying, don't smoke weed, don't hang out with your bad friends. But at the same time, here's your car, here's your allowance. Let me bail you out of jail when you get in trouble, right? Let me continue to enable your lifestyle, which I don't like and I'm bitching about. But at the same, like, that's how I grew up. My parents bailed me out of jail at 18 when I got caught stealing stuff. And they, continued to feed me and clothe me and house me. But at the same time, they're constantly nagging and accusing and kind of really just dead set against me living the way that they were supporting me to live.
Right.
So what I want to say here is that it took until I was in a marriage where my now ex-wife actually went to Al-Anon. And I never thought I'd tell this story because I hated this when it was happening to me. I thought I thought Al-Anon was a bunch of, excuse me, but I thought these were the biggest bitches on planet Earth. There's all these jokes about Al-Anon people. They say, here's a good example. They say, why doesn't Al-Anon have sex with her eyes closed?
Why?
Because she can't stand to see an alcoholic having a good time. So, right. So that was kind of my perspective on the whole thing. And when my ex went to Al-Anon, she learned how to set healthy boundaries, right? And say, I'm not going to support you if you're going to do that. And if you do that, there has to be consequences. And I'm doing this from a position of love, but at a distance. How do you feel about the whole tough love game? Is that something, I mean, obviously people struggle with it, but
you know what? It worked on my end. So obviously it probably hurt my mom to do that, to tell me I can't come to the house, that I can't live with her or whatever.
Yeah.
But like the first time I went to jail, right, for some not paying a ticket or whatever, I remember calling her up, I got that first call, I said, hey mom, I said, I'm in jail. Can you bail me out? And here's where I carried resentment. So because he would do that for my brother, but so I'm in there for 3 days. I didn't know it was good, but I thought it was longer, So I say, hey, mom, can you bail me out? And all I heard was her little laugh and then the dial tone. And I was like, and the guy next to me goes, hey dog, I think that means no. I go, you think? And I was like, and that was a huge resentment I carried, because I remember walking into the house, my mom's getting at the time they were allowed to send care packages, so she's got small boxes of cereal.
The good old days.
Yeah, and can you help me get this ready for your little brother? And I'm like, no. Are you live? Yeah, I'm live. And I got so mad that gave me a reason to go, I'm gonna go die right now, because how dare you? You wouldn't even bail me out of jail, but you want me to help send care packages. And that's why me and my little brother when we were in our active addiction could not stand each other. Like we would literally go toe to toe, and it was bad. But when he had 8 years at one point, we were very close before he passed.
Sure, of course.
He's got a daughter who looks just like him, and in contact with her. But yeah, it's like you get the extremes, like, we're not talking to you. You don't come around the house, to where fix my kid, so we, you know what I mean? And like I've been blown up by parents like every day. How are they doing? Are they doing okay? They called me, they were upset. I'm like, oh my God, let them have their journey. Let us work on them, But like you said, I get it. It's like I've had like, and that's why I probably stayed a counselor for so long. I mean, not burned out, because I love what I do, and I see there's days I come home and I'm like, I don't even want to talk. Like, I've had a bad day, just leave me alone. Client said to me, blah, blah, blah. But it's been the best thing that's ever happened. And, and in writing this book, that's where I came out of not being anonymous, because I want to help carry a message of hope to whoever. And it doesn't matter if you're in recovery. Everybody's in some type of recovery, I believe, from some type of traumatic life event. Addiction just happens to be, to me, in my opinion, the nastiest of the diseases. You know what I mean? Because it tells us it tells our brain we don't have one, that we're fine, good, and you see the destruction. I don't have to tell you. You've seen it. I've seen it.
Mm.
It's just, it breaks my heart sometimes.
When you, how did you come to the point where you knew you were going to be, or you wanted to go into therapy and counseling and work with other addicts?
Okay, that was an interesting story. So my last relapse in the facility, right?
Yeah.
It was just a 1-day deal, and so I got sober. Actually, the house manager saw me, and he's like, in the office now. Like, I knew that was my 4th time. He's not going to mess around. They're going to test me. No, I'm dirty.
Yeah.
And the director, who never came on the weekends, especially a Sunday, happens to come knocking on my door right after he left and went back to the office. And she said, "Hey, Max, how you doing?" And before I could lie to her, I said, "You know what? I got high again." And I remember her giving me a hug and, get your bag, get out of here, come back in 3 days and test clean. So that's another story. But what happened for me, so when I came back, I believe God surrendered me. Like, if it was my decision, I probably would have tested it a little more, see how far I can push it.
Right.
But when I looked in the mirror after I got high, it was just like my life flashed before me. I saw this shell of a person. I was disgusted at what I saw. And so I did what she said. I came back, tested, clean. And I came back, and I've been clean and sober ever since. But the catalyst for me is I was watching, there's 7 of us who went through the same facility that are still sober today.
Wow.
All of us are in double digits, which is
That's
rare.
awesome. Yeah, very rare.
After my last relapse, I decided to, if my sponsor said, jump on one foot, rub your belly, pick your nose, I would have did whatever he said, right?
Sure.
So I was getting into my steps again. He gave me a step to do a month. He told me, just be as honest and do it as best you can, and we'll move on, right? Until I got to the 4th. That took a little longer and I'll tell that later. But so what happened for me is I was watching my friend who went through that, who was now gone, but he was going to school to become a counselor, and cool dude. And I was like, man, I want to do that. You know what I mean? So I remember at 30 days sober, I told my sponsor, I'm going to be a counselor. And he goes, no, you're not. I'll tell you. So I said, all right. I told him I would listen. So he said, just go to your meetings and, do your step work. And 2 years had gone by that quick, right? Where I just totally forgot about that. And I was doing any job, whatever, just to pay my rent, to get through this thing so I don't go back to prison. And at 2 years, he reminded me, he goes, "Hey, Max, you still want to be a counselor?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like a little kid. Oh, yeah, cool. Dude. And he goes, I think it's a good time now. So I went back to school and got my certification, and
Wow.
and the rest is history. And then I actually, after I went through school, the first day at my new job as a case manager, right? And one of my instructors happened to be my supervisor. So she's the one that I get on the computer. I'm going to sign up for college, right? I signed up for college, and I remember signing up first 3 classes. I go, this college thing is hard, like they say, until I got to that 4th class, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? But, I stuck with it. 7 years later, I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, with
That's beautiful, man.
in substance abuse. And, things started to go. But what I did, my first 3 years, literally, I was in 2 meetings a day, every day, 7 days a week. It's what I had to do because I knew myself. And if I gave myself any little bit of free time, hey, maybe I should go get the homeboy sober because I'm freaking sober.
Right. Yeah.
That was my whole rationale for my first relapse. But that's what happened for me. And I've loved it ever since, and I make sure that I take care of my recovery, because working in treatment is not my recovery.
Right.
My recovery is being in meetings, working with other, sponsoring guys, continue to apply those principles in all my affairs. And because I've seen so many burnout where they think that as they work in treatment, that's their recovery, and they forget about what their recovery really is.
Right. The burnout's real, man. Like I went to a meeting this morning, and I actually want to tell this story and get your perspective on it, and then touch on what you're doing and who you're able to serve right now, and we'll close out after that. But In terms of kind of coming back to this parent or people, or especially family members that are supporting addicts, after the meeting, I gave somebody a ride, and when the person got out of the car, they went and gathered up their things, and this individual said, "Oh," pulled a empty water bottle out of their bag, said, "Oh, this is garbage," and they put it in my center console and proceeded to get out of the car. And in that moment, I thought to myself, that's kind of what we as addicts do. We bring our shit and we just dump it on other people and walk away.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that this disease is so incredibly frustrating to deal with. And I think for me, in learning how to cope with those things, and especially in having healthy boundaries, I can say to that individual, as I did, "Hey, that's your garbage. Why don't you take it with you?"
Exactly.
Now, here's the effed up part. Ready? The person looked at me square in the eye and said, "That's a good idea," and turned around and walked away and left the bottle. So, I'm like, man.
Yeah.
But that's the sad truth. Like, I had to remind myself, like, this person was doing absolutely the best they can.
Right. And that's
You
that whole
know,
part about meeting them where they're at, right? And there's
boom.
you know, what I've learned as a counselor and studying different, that motivational interviewing, there's one part that says, you roll with the, you don't argue with them, you don't fight with them, you don't tell them like you need to do it this way or you're gonna die, right? That's the old timer, which we understand, right? I get what they're saying, but when you got someone brand new and they don't like authority as it is, especially that
Right.
younger crowd, because not only are they looking at you like, here's another parent trying to tell me what to do. I'm 19 years old. I know better. So rolling with the resistance, right? So then, I just learned to go, okay, well, let's see where we can go with that. You know what I mean? Instead of arguing. And then what I might do is like, okay, so tell me, how did you get here? I mean, if you got this under control,
Yeah.
why are you
Yeah.
in treatment? Oh, that's right. You went to juvie at 16. Okay, tell me about
Uh,
that. You know what I mean? So
uh,
all those decisions you made that you're a kid
uh,
has gotten you into some really messed up places, right? Mom and dad now have kicked you out and you have nowhere to go, but yet your life is together. And then they'll look at me like, oh, okay, well, maybe my life is not so great. You get the stubborn ones where they think, oh, it's bad luck. Like for me, every time I got butt, it was bad luck.
right. Yeah.
Being, I'm a good, why would the police arrest a good guy like me? You know what I mean? I'm such a nice guy.
Yeah.
So it can be a battle, I mean, I'm not saying, the success rate, unless here's the statistics proves that long-term treatment works 90 days or more. You know what I mean? Because you got to create new habits.
Forget about 28 days. Forget
Right.
about it.
Exactly. And that's why they
Which
say
is bad news for the people paying, but hey, that's another topic.
that's another topic, right? But that's why they always tell us, right? When you're new, 90 meetings in 90 days, right? Because science has proven to create a new habit, it takes at least 66 days of consistent action, right? So if you're not consistently not trying to put a drug in your system or a drink in your system, how are you going to change? Because if you're still doing old behaviors. And
Yep. And what's more, you've probably been putting that thing in consistently for more than 66 days.
right, exactly. So you're like me at getting sober at 32. I had to break some really long-term habits, right? And and old behaviors come up when I'm frustrated, but I mean, I worked on myself hard enough to be able to tell, like, if I'm working with a client, whether it's young or older, and say, well, look, this is what happened for me. And, until I could change my thinking or my behaviors, nothing was going to change. I mean, I had my oldest client I had who's still sober 5 years later was 80 years old. 80 years old, he came to treatment because he
That's
wanted
beautiful.
and he's still sober from what I hear 5 years later.
You know, what's incredible about that is how we when you were saying that until we change our behavior, that's kind of one of the big things to remember is whether you're the addict or whether you're the family member listening on behalf of an addict, the only person that can change me is me. And
Right.
Max, if you try to change me, I might have to have you committed for insanity.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
As good as my intentions, you may look at me like, dude, that ain't gonna happen. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm king of my world and I'm gonna change myself.
The
But
harder, the harder you push to change me, the more I'm going to dig in too.
oh yeah, you know what I mean? The resistance to change. We don't like change as
Mm.
alcoholics and addicts, you know what I mean? And I've had to take a hard look in my 16 years of being clean and sober. Like there was some behaviors I had to change even in sobriety and go, yeah, that's not serving me. And plus I'm hurting all these people around me because I think I know it all, you know,
Mm.
and I just try to take each day as like I have something new to learn. You know what I mean? A good friend of mine, that guy Chris Whitehead, told me, learn to lean into the suck, right?
Awesome.
And I've learned to go like, you know, is what happened is just lean in and go, I know God's got a lesson for me and he'll get me through this. He didn't bring me this far to drop me on
Mm.
my butt. And you know, and it's been a great life so far, and it continues to be because I practice those principles in all my affairs, and I try to help others, and not just the alcoholic or the addict. You know, it's my sponsor always told me, he goes, you don't get to pick and choose who you help. It's going to show up,
Mm.
do it or you don't. And I'm like, man, now you're throwing that on me, bro. Like I got to help.
Right.
But you know, he was my sponsor for 16 years, and but he retired. He owned a treatment center. He finally retired and moved to Vegas. So I got a new sponsor who's a old school punk rocker. Plays, I don't know if you know the band Smut Peddlers, but he's an
No,
awesome dude. You know what I mean? He plays
that's
guitar.
cool.
He's a counselor, and you know, I miss my old place because of the camaraderie and stuff like that. My new place is good, but I'm saying like I couldn't get out of any. I sat in the same office with my sponsor, and he would look like, "Hey, what's going on?" You
Mm.
know, or he knew when stuff was up, and it was cool. But that's how we do it. Like when we find our tribe, and we all of us are like-minded and want the best for each other without anything in return. That's the beauty of recovery. You know what I mean? We're just trying to help the next person go, look what we're doing. Like you can have this too. It just takes a little work.
Powerful words, Max. I'm really grateful to have had you on today, and I would like to just close just by asking you: is there what are the best ways people can get in touch with you? And maybe just mention the title of your book. I know it's available on Amazon.
Correct.
In fact, it's called Fearless Happyness with a Y, HAPPYNESS. Fearless Happyness: My Addiction, My Battles, My Recovery, which got a lot of great reviews on here as well, sir. So how can people connect with you?
So they can reach me. I have a Facebook page, which I'm trying to match my group, but it's called Max's Positive Place. They can come and follow that, or they can join the group. It's called Fearless Happyness. It's a free group where there's a bunch of us in recovery that share, you know, inspiration, motivation. There's people that are not in recovery that share inspiration and motivation. It's for anybody who has had struggles in their life that want to be fearless in their pursuit of happiness. And the reason I put why,
Yes.
because happiness starts with us. Like
Mm.
nothing outside of me. Like I heard an old timer say, I have no control out of anything past my nose. So I
Wow,
have to, you know what I mean? And I was
that's
like, that
beautiful.
makes sense to me, you know? So you can reach me there. I have a website that's about to be up and running. You know,
All
it's
right.
gonna be a membership site where where stuff like this will be, you know, stored, and so people can go back and see different stuff like that. So it's maxnijst.com. But the easiest place right now is my page, Max's Positive Place, and my Fearless Happiness group. Yeah, you can purchase the book on Amazon. It's $14.95, and you know, just reach out. I'm
Super.
pretty much available most of the time,
Super.
but If I don't
That's
get
awesome.
back to you, I will get back to you.
Well, a recent guest, Jennifer Elizabeth, who's also a recovery author, said wonderful things about you. As I mentioned before we got on the call, she was, when I asked her who I should get on the show, you were the first person across her lips. So that's high praise from good friends of recovery authors. So I want to thank you again for coming on the show and spending time to speak to us about your recovery and how you are authoring, not only for yourself, but for your clients and those around you as well. Thank you, sir. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you. The honor's mine. Thank you for having me on here, Jesse. I was excited when she told me that you were going to have me on your show. Like, really?
Man,
Like,
this is
you know,
great. Well, the pleasure is all mine, my friend. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining us today on Recovery Authors. As always, you can head over to recoveryauthors.org to see more ways to help us out, to support the mission, and to connect with me and everyone in the movement. Like Max, we also have a Facebook group, and you can connect with me right there or across social media. Finally, I will say that Max's book and all the ways, including his upcoming website, are available on show notes at Recovery Authors website. So have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.